Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show. Hope you're having a great day as we come to you from the Citizens Bank studio. It's been a great week on the show. I've enjoyed our new partnership with Singing River Health System. The second half of every single Wednesday show is going to be Singing River Health Talk, and we'll have a professional in from the Singing River system to talk to us about how to stay healthy. The first installment was about colon health. Had a terrific visit with a doctor by the name of Ramon Brown. It was just a great visit. And then we had a really good visit with a dietitian and nutritionist to talk about health in general, but mostly, how to lose weight and the commitment that Singing River Health System has to help people lose weight, whether it's through medication or through diet or through surgery. And we had a terrific conversation about that. Also yesterday, had Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann for an entire hour. So we talked about the legislative session, the dynamic legislative session as they continue to battle and debate tax reform and so many other things. They passed a lot of bills, incidentally, and J.T. Mitchell from SuperTalk Mississippi News, the news director, will join me in the second half, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about some of those bills that are off the radar screen that have been being passed. That they typically get a lot done in a very bipartisan way, but what you hear are the headlines: school choice, tax reform, and those kinds of things. But we also talked about the enormous potential for Mississippi, and especially coastal Mississippi. I've written a lot about it lately. I plan to write more about it. We're going to dedicate some shows to it. There will be a theme on this show about us in coastal Mississippi raising the bar. It's not about anybody did anything wrong or passing blame or any of that. It's about how do we take what we already do well and bring it together in more of a regional vision so that we can compete with some enormously competent competitors in places like the Golden Triangle of Mississippi and Savannah and the Florida Panhandle and so on. So we're going to continue to have those conversations, and I want my voice to urge leaders to get involved and to begin to not look at Katrina anymore. It's time to move to a new chapter in coastal Mississippi's future, and recognize that communities all over Florida, up the East Coast, have hurricanes too, and they've had tremendous success. And so it's time for us to kind of turn that page and get organized and have a vision for this region. We're going to be talking a lot about that as we go forward. So now let's shift gears and move to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. And first of all, just say good morning. How you doing, my friend?
Ricky, I'm doing great. I heard you mention Hurricane Katrina. Isn't it hard to believe that we're coming up on 20 years?
Isn't it? I mean, really, I've been doing a lot of reflecting, as with you. It was a life-changing event, and for coastal Mississippi and the New Orleans, this entire region, we had to rebuild. And you know what's interesting? A stat for coastal Mississippi, as well as people perceive we're doing, and we really are doing well in the frame of Hurricane Katrina. It took us until 2022. Think about that, 17 years. To get to our pre-Katrina peak in jobs. Think about that for a minute.
Wow.
I mean, we had to scratch and claw our way all the way back to that point. And one of the things that I've focused a lot on is just, it's time to shift gears. It's time to, put that behind us and let's move forward. The Golden Triangle in Mississippi, for example, during that same period of time grew economic development by $11 billion.
Wow.
Mobile is 15,000 jobs ahead of their pre-Katrina hit peak. So it's time for us to kind of put all that to bed and start to move forward. I know that, I watch very closely with Greater New Orleans Inc. and others in the New Orleans region. And this is a very similar conversation that's taking place in New Orleans constantly, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about, there'll be a time coming up here where we're going to have to reflect a little bit, obviously as a 20-year mark, but I think it's important to look forward and try to experience some of the growth we're seeing across the country. I think New Orleans has been a little bit of a rut here the last few years, but hopefully new leadership coming on, this city can kind of realize that potential and move forward. But I do have to admit, it seems in some ways like just yesterday, I can still have vivid memories of Katrina and covering the storm afterward. And then other times it feels like it's been forever since it happened.
That's the way I say it too, Jeff. And in fact, I will add, it feels like another lifetime. You know what I'm saying? It's like it was another lifetime. It's almost like I died and came back, and I'm looking back on this. This is a reincarnated world that we're living in now. It's just hard to grasp the experience of Katrina and sense within a 20-year frame. I mean, it's almost impossible to get that in your head.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in on a panel session at the New Orleans Book Festival next weekend on Katrina with my former colleague Jarvis DeBerry. Lucy Bustamante is going to moderate. It's going to be, I think, a fascinating session on the impact the storm had, covering it, what some of our memories were, but also just the widespread impact. You alluded to it earlier. I don't think people understand just how devastating the storm was and the impact it had, almost a domino effect on every facet of life and business in our society. It was just, I don't know if America will ever see another storm of that impact. I certainly hope we don't.
I hope we don't either, man. But by the way, tell Jarvis I said hello. What a terrific writer he is. Yeah, I think, one of the things we said after Katrina here in coastal Mississippi, it's the same as obviously true for New Orleans and the New Orleans region, is that on any given day, aside from a hurricane or any major event, I mean, I'm just talking about under normal circumstances, a community is challenged. It's challenged with its mental health. It's challenged with, nonprofits serving the community. It's challenged with economic development. It's always working to increase the pay in their community and create more jobs. And, I could just go on and on. There are so many dimensions that on a normal day, if a community is focused, they're having to make sure that they're bridging gaps and filling the gaps and all of that. When Katrina hit, it literally devastated every dimension simultaneously. And so you're having to come back. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, we literally had to work our way up there. And it really took us 17 years to get, if you think about the Maslow hierarchy, getting back to self-actualization. Our communities are now getting back to where there's an actualization happening, where we can really now think about the future and where we want to go from here. But there are projects, and I'm sure this is true for the New Orleans regions as well. There are projects, infrastructure projects, that are still happening in coastal Mississippi today that are from the federal money that came from Hurricane Katrina this many years later, 20 years later. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well said. And I just don't think, unless you experienced it and lived here through the storm and the aftermath, you can really appreciate just how widespread something like that is. And the tentacles the storm had, like you said, it went into every facet of your life, and just rebuilding normal society from almost the ground up. I mean, we still had a lot of the infrastructure, but just all the services and just the human resources that we lost. And a lot of it we're still trying to recover. That impact, I think there's going to be a lot of studies written on it, I'm sure, but it certainly was a phenomenon that our people here, I think, showed our resilience in coming back. I've always said, when you came back to New Orleans after Katrina or anywhere in the Gulf Coast, I mean, you were invested. I mean, there were no fence sitters, right? I mean, you had a choice and you went back. You were emotionally, financially, spiritually invested in the region and the recovery. So that created a lot of resilience and toughness in the people here.
Listen, I had a really important conversation with John Hairston, and you know him because he's the CEO of Hancock Whitney, and he's a really, really good friend. And last June, and we actually posted this portion of the conversation. I'm writing a column about it now. But last June, he and I visited, and we had this conversation about, rebuilding and what he referred to as, this is now peacetime. What are we going to do in peacetime? And the implication is that we have Katrina, these are battles, these are wartime moments. We have the Bonnie Carey spillway. We have the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. All these things challenge us. And when they challenge us, they bring us together. Like you think in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, you had constituents both in in coastal Mississippi and in the greater New Orleans areas coming together in ways they'd never come together before, because there's a powerful lubrication to change that comes from pain. And a lot of walls went down, and people began to think about the rebuilding process in a different way. We're at the end of this segment. When I get back on the other side, I'll finish that thought, give you an opportunity to respond, and then we'll talk about the latest with the Saints. We'll continue after this with my friend Jeff Duncan. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. He's an award-winning columnist, but after Hurricane Katrina, it was all hands hit the deck. So Jeff was there, part of the Pulitzer Prize-winning team at the Times-Picayune. They won a Pulitzer Gold Medal for public service, just as the Sun-Herald did as well, which was really surreal for me to have been here and then go to New Orleans. That also seems like another life. But I was mentioning, Jeff, that the challenge that John Hairston had is, when tough times happen, it does bring us together, as I was mentioning before we went to the break. But what happens is, as things begin to settle down, people start to go back to their silos. Really, and it's hard. I mean, if people are in their silos, they're protecting the status quo. They're protecting their turf. All those things. These are all natural phenomena that happen in any community. And John's challenge is during peacetime, when we don't have these big challenges, how can we come together in the same sort of way and focus on where we are now and where we want to go as a region, or whatever perspective you bring into that conversation. And I think that's a really important challenge. And I think that's something we've got to think about. We have to move away from always putting things in perspective of Katrina and starting to put everything in perspective with where we are going and where we want to go. And that's a transition we need to make. And it's amazing we're having this conversation 20 years after Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, I think people sometimes, you have a storm like that, a phenomenon like that, it tends to melt away all of our differences, and you go almost into survival mode, right? I mean, everyone unites together in a common cause, and you're right. And you can see the potential that we can achieve when that happens, when everyone unites. And then as things start to progress, you're right, we tend to go back to the way things used to be. And we can't afford that if we want to realize our potential. And I think great leadership helps get us directed in the right direction, and hopefully we get more of that in the Gulf Coast going forward, because it's going to take that for us to get there. There's so much potential here. Yeah. We see it during times like the Super Bowl, where everything came together. The whole city of New Orleans came together for a common cause, and you saw how it came out.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what a great success story. Leadership, federal leadership, state leadership, local leadership, regional leadership, political leadership, nonprofit leadership. It takes it all, man. It's a team. As we often use the phrase, it takes a village to achieve big goals. But here's the thing, man. While we wrestle with that, our competitors, they didn't have any of that fog and any of that disruption. They've been, for the last 20 years, kicking butt. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing we got to keep. In this column I wrote that our competitors aren't sleeping, and I added they plan to sleep when they're dead. And if we don't take that approach going forward, we will lose tremendous opportunity. That's kind of where I am. So we'll shift gears now and move on. Man, there's a lot of headlines. Your team's doing a great job of capturing all the headlines coming from the Saints these days. But real quickly, you actually have a different assignment this week, don't you?
Yeah, actually, I'm excited about it. Covering the Louisiana Derby, the 112th running. It's the biggest horse race in the state, obviously. These are the horses, Ricky, that will qualify for the Kentucky Derby. So as a Louisville native who grew up, the Kentucky Derby was our Mardi Gras. It's our big event. It's the most popular horse race in the world. And so it's kind of fun to see these horses here up close and personal as they qualify for the Derby on the first Saturday in May. And there's going to be some great horses running. The weather is going to be spectacular. It's always a huge crowd out at the fairgrounds, so it should be a fun day at the races out at Gentilly.
Well, I look forward to reading your coverage, because you're right. I mean, we in coastal Mississippi don't tend to think much about horse racing. There are some people obviously who do, but what a great part of the culture of Louisiana over so many years, and you've been attached to it all these years as well. Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley are working hard to try to shape things and already beginning to put their fingerprints on this team, aren't they?
Yeah, the coaching staff's been busy, I think, installing a lot of the offense and defensive schemes that they're going to run. I think they're still work in progress there. Meanwhile, they're trying to shape the roster for the upcoming season. This is the time of year you do it. We're in basically the third phase of free agency. So right now you're seeing a lot of minor deals, guys, veterans on 1-year contracts. This was not a great free agent period in the NFL. There was not a lot of big names. Most of the big names got protected with franchise tags or stayed home with the regular team. So it wasn't going to be a Boffo year of free agency. You weren't going to get a Drew Brees, for instance, or DeMario Davis. So, what the Saints did, I think, was fill in some holes, create a little depth, bring back the players that they wanted to be a part of their core. And I think they did a good job of doing that within the limitations that they had with the salary cap.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Landon Young, for example, I mean, just one example of several that are 1-year contracts. Juwan Johnson, do you think he would have been playing for Denver if we had not signed him?
Maybe. I know Sean Payton obviously thought a lot of him. I mean, they're the ones that were in here when they brought him in from Oregon. And I know tight end ended up signing Evan Ingram in Denver, who's the same similar type of player as Juwan Johnson. And that's where the Saints are right now. One of the downsides of where they're at as a franchise is, they're not winning. So when you're not winning, it becomes less attractive for players. You kind of have to overpay. And that's kind of what they did with Justin Reed and Juwan Johnson. You could probably say the same for Chase Young. They're having to pay a little more than market value because of the situation. And I think that's also why they have signed a lot of players from the Mississippi, Louisiana region, because you get a little bit of a hometown discount there if you're bringing someone back home like a Justin Reed, someone like that. A lot of players that have ties to New Orleans area or Louisiana, Mississippi, it's easier to get those guys. I think it's a smart strategy right now while you're going through a transition.
Yeah, Godshaw is an example of that.
Right. Yeah, and they traded for Godshaw, of course, but same thing. I mean, they're trying to bring players here that want to play in this region because there's so many great players that come out of this Mississippi Gulf Coast area. I mean, it's one of the most fertile talent bases in all of America, maybe the most fertile.
So Mel Kiper made some headlines really kind of all over social media when he talked about Saints might take a quarterback in the first round. What's your thoughts about that?
I think Mel was reaching there. I mean, look, it's a mock draft season. It's the silly season. Everybody's got to put together a mock draft. Nobody really knows what they're doing with those. I'll be stunned if the Saints take a quarterback at number 9. Stunned. Now we had Cam Ward here in town this week for the Manning Award, and I had a chance to visit with him. And he talked about how he visited with the Saints. Of course, they visit with 45 players, so it's not like every one of them they're going to take. But he did mention that he grew up being a Saints fan in Texas. He's going to be the number 1 pick, so if they're going to get him, they're going to have to go up and make a Boffo trade to get Cam Ward. But that's what I'm saying. This time of year, you get all kinds of crazy speculation.
Yeah, it would be a Mike Ditka kind of trade to get him, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would take all the assets they have to go up to get a player of that caliber. But he's clearly the number 1 player. I just think the Saints have so many needs right now, and because of the Derek Carr situation, I mean, unless they got something brewing that none of us know about, that they're going to try and make a deal or something for Derek Carr to create an opening, I can't see them taking a quarterback right now, unless there's one that they have extremely highly graded that we don't know about. And this draft does not have at least the consensus in the scouting community. Other than Cam Ward, there's just a lot of question marks at quarterback.
Well, look, you and I have spent a lot of time over the past month or so talking about Cam Jordan. And you said this last year that He has a big contract, and he's not going to just bail out. There's too much money on the table. But according to Matthew Paris, he did on your staff. Cam Jordan did the Saints a big favor in the way that he did that restructure.
Yeah, he basically took a pay cut, and that's where he's at in his career. If he wants to stay, he had to make a family decision, basically. And Cam Jordan's made a lot of money in his career. So, $2 or $3 million to us is a lot of money. It's a lot of money really to anybody. But for someone like him, he might be willing to take that haircut because he has played with one franchise his entire career. And I think uprooting his family, all the work he does in the community at this stage, just didn't make a lot of sense to him unless it was a perfect situation. So I think him coming back makes a lot of sense.
So are you watching the other teams in our division? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, no, I think they're all getting better. I think it's going to be very competitive. And I see why the Saints are trying to run it back. And I think if they were in another division, if they're AFC West with the Chiefs and Broncos, and teams like that, they may have a different strategy. But in this division where it's still attainable to win the division, I can see how they're tempted to try and make a run here because no one's going to win the Super Bowl from the NFC South. But it's going to be competitive.
It is not a quote-unquote rebuild. It's not. I mean, people can call it whatever they want to.
Right.
But they're trying to keep the core of this team together, and and it's clear they're going to try to win. They
think they're better but they've been thinking they're better for a number of years than everybody else does, and that's what worries me a little bit. But
then we get into next year, and we got a bunch of young players, and salary cap's not as big an issue. So I think they got a good plan. We'll see how it all pans out. Jeff, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
All right, Ricky. Have a great weekend, buddy.
You bet. This has been Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and Times Picayune. We'll see you after this break.